Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are preparing for a major professional assessment, and I mean specifically gearing up for a high-stakes portfolio review, or maybe you just want to understand what true distinction-level data excellence really looks like, this deep dive is absolutely for you, the learner.
hmm
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is pretty unique, and it's highly specific. We are going to simulate the entire experience of a distinction-level endpoint assessment, that's the ETA portfolio discussion, for a Level 3 data technician apprenticeship.
Yeah, this is a big one.
It is. We've pulled together a really comprehensive stack of sources here that map out the exact sequence of questions, the kind of depth you need in your answers, and even the complex follow-up probes that are designed not just to test what you remember, but to really test your critical thinking and your business judgment.
That's absolutely right. The goal here is it's immersive preparation. We want to put you, the listener, right there in that assessment room.
Yeah.
Because the assessor, they're looking for more than just, your technical ability. They want to see you link every single technical action, from cleaning data in SQL to, say, designing a chart. They want to see that link directly to a quantifiable business impact and a real understanding of organizational governance.
And we're going to run this whole simulation through the lens of a fictional, but I think very realistic, company we're calling Hungry Now, which is a rapidly growing food delivery platform.
A classic example.
Exactly. And the core project will be analyzing centers on optimizing delivery performance and enhancing restaurant efficiency. And look, our structure is going to be rigid, but it's for a very good reason. It follows the mandatory knowledge, skills, and behaviors, the KSBs, that the assessors literally have to check off.
It's their rubric.
It is. So we're going to simulate the full flow. We'll start with the formalities, move through the detailed question, then the ideal distinction-level answer, then that challenging assessor probe, and finally, the reflective follow-up response.
And this is key. After each of those exchanges, we will step out of the simulation for a moment to analyze why that response hits the distinction marker. We'll look at the technical detail and, just as important, the contextual justification behind it. This disciplined, structured approach where we explicitly address those KSBs is, it's really your shortcut to mastering not just the portfolio evidence, but the high-pressure interview itself.
Okay, I think we're ready. Let's formally begin the simulation.
Let's do it.
Clear throat, adopting a more formal assessor tone. Good morning. We are commencing the endpoint assessment discussion for your data technician portfolio. For the record, could you please confirm your full name and that you are prepared to discuss the evidence presented in your portfolio relating to the Hungry Now project?
Responding as the candidate with a clear, steady voice, yes, I confirm my name is candidate name, and I am fully prepared to discuss the analysis project focusing on delivery performance and restaurant efficiency at Hungry Now. As assessor. Excellent. We have mapped this discussion to the key KSB criteria. Let's start with the foundational elements of data strategy. Shifting back to commentator voice. Okay, so we're starting the simulation with foundational questions about data strategy. This area is really testing your core knowledge components. That's K1, understanding data types, K4 on data architecture, and K6, which is all about data context and value.
Exactly. The assessor is trying to establish how deeply you understand the raw materials of your analysis. And not just that, but the architectural landscape they actually live in. They want to move beyond you just saying you can retrieve data. They want to understand your judgment.
So the first question is almost always a version of this. Imagine the assessor asks, how did you choose the most appropriate data source for your task?
Right. And a distinction level answer here has to do three things. It has to compare sources, it has to explicitly justify the choices based on technical suitability, and it has to acknowledge the real-world constraints, like legal and ethical boundaries. As candidate, when starting the Hungry Now project, I needed a comprehensive view of delivery operations, which immediately necessitated integrating multiple data types. My approach involved a careful comparison of our structured internal SQL data, which housed core transactional records like orders, customer details, and restaurant commissions, with external feeds. Specifically, we utilized third-party traffic and localized weather API data.
As commentator, okay, pause right there. Notice the immediate use of specific terminology. Structured internal SQL data, external feeds, third-party weather API. This already signals technical fluency.
As candidate, the justification for these choices was layered. The internal data, which was stored in an OLTP SQL Server database, was highly structured, reliable, and possessed high referential integrity because, well, we control the input mechanisms. It served as our single source of truth for all financial metrics. However, The external APIs, which typically provide semi-structured JSON data, required intensive validation. I knew their update frequency might be inconsistent, and missing values were a significant risk.
And that contrast is the absolute key. It's not just I use two sources. It's I use this reliable internal source and this less reliable but necessary external source. And I was aware of the risks of the second one. That's case 6, understanding the context and value, or lack thereof, of your data.
He's also hitting K4 by distinguishing between the architecture and internal OLTP database versus a JSON API feed. It shows he understands the pipeline, not just the endpoint.
Precisely. Let's hear the end of that answer.
As candidate, my final selection criteria were stringent. I prioritized sources based on data completeness for key fields, the consistency of update frequency for our time-sensitive analysis, and of course, strict adherence to ethical and legal constraints, particularly around customer and writer PII. This comprehensive, validated multi-source selection was essential to ensure the analysis was accurate and repeatable. It's what allowed us to contextualize delivery delays. For example, isolating weather delays from kitchen preparation delays effectively.
And that's the perfect landing. He links the careful source selection directly to a specific, tangible business outcome, being able to tell the difference between a slow kitchen and a rainstorm. Let's break down why that whole answer is an immediate distinction marker.
Go for it.
First, the candidate introduces multiple data types almost immediately: internal, external, structured, semi-structured. That shows a real breadth of knowledge hitting K1. But like we said, the key differentiator is articulating the contrast and reliability. Internal data was reliable, external needs intensive validation. That shows a critical understanding of the risks associated with different data architectures, which is pure K6.
And if you just say something generic like, I use delivery data, you sound passive, like you were just given a file. But do you say, I queried internal OLTP data via SQL and integrated semi-structured JSON from a weather API, you sound like an architect. You sound like someone who actually understands the whole pipeline.
Exactly. Now, this kind of multi-source environment inevitably introduces friction. The assessor knows this, and they're going to probe for that complexity immediately, which leads to the next logical question.
As assessor, what challenges did you face integrating data from multiple systems?
And this is where candidates often stumble if they haven't prepared a really specific technical example. General answers won't cut it here. The challenge at HungryNod, according to the sources, was specifically about inconsistent key structures.
As candidate, the primary technical challenge was grappling with inconsistent schemas across the systems, which is a common issue when you're linking legacy databases with more modern partner platforms. Specifically, the restaurant IDs did not uniformly match the naming conventions across our core operational database versus the data from the third-party partner app, which we pull in daily. For instance, restaurant ID 12345 might be named the Curry House internally, but it could appear as Curry House UK in the partner app.
A perfect, concrete example.
As candidate, if you join that incorrectly, it leads to phantom performance issues or, even worse, lost revenue attribution. To resolve this, I implemented mapping tables. That's essentially a dedicated lookup table built in SQL to systematically link those inconsistent IDs. I use fuzzy matching algorithms and then manual verification for our high-volume partners. I then established verification queries that would run before the main ETL process to ensure accurate one-to-one joins. This preventative action significantly improved the accuracy of our joins, and we measured it. It reduced the error rate in our critical operational dashboards by nearly 7%, which directly impacted the misallocation of delivery resources.
That is a brilliant distinction-level answer. He didn't just say, I fixed it. He explained the exact technical solution mapping tables, fuzzy matching verification queries, and then, crucially, he quantified the impact of that fix, reduced the error rate by nearly 7%.
That's a clever approach, but hold on a moment. I could see an assessor pushing back here. They might ask, isn't using a mapping table just a tactical patch? A Band-Aid? Why didn't you insist the source system, the partner app, be fixed strategically?
That's a perfect follow-up question. It tests professional judgment and business awareness. The candidate needs to be able to defend their tactical choice while still acknowledging the strategic ideal.
As a candidate, that's an important distinction to make. While a strategic fix to standardize the source system is absolutely the long-term goal, the immediate business need was to provide accurate reporting today. Fixing the source system required a significant engineering effort that was already prioritized, but for the next quarter. My tactical solution, the mapping table, provided an immediate, verifiable, and governed method to ensure reporting continuity. It prevented flawed decisions in the interim. It was simply the most pragmatic and time-sensitive solution given the organizational constraints we were working with.
See, that defense elevates the answer. It's no longer just a technical description, it's a demonstration of professional maturity, which is a core part of Behavior B6. He understood the business constraint and acted accordingly.
Okay, fantastic. So let's close this first section by connecting all these sources and challenges back to business value. The assessor probe naturally follows this discussion.
This is the so what question.
As assessor, how did using multiple data sources add value to the business?
This is pure case 6. The distinction level response has to shift entirely away from the technical process, the SQL queries, the JSON parsing, and focus on a tangible, quantified business insight that led to a real change.
As candidate, using multiple sources allowed us to cross-validate trends and generate predictive insights that were, frankly, completely invisible when looking at one data source alone. The most impactful example involved delivery delays. Our internal data showed a persistent cluster of delays between 6:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. that didn't correlate with typical factors like high order volume or restaurant preparation times. We were stumped.
Setting the stage perfectly. Building the narrative.
As candidate. But when we blended our internal delivery timestamps with the external weather data from that local API feed, specifically isolating periods of severe precipitation and temperature drops, we identified a one-to-one correlation. Significant service degradation only occurred during heavy rain or unexpected snow. That connection was the single most valuable insight of the entire project.
And now comes the impact.
As candidate, the business impact was immediate and measurable. We used this information to inform a new dynamic staffing policy. This led us to schedule 15% more riders during predicted peak weather disruptions, which directly resulted in a 4-point improvement in our customer satisfaction scores. Our CS had a measurable increase in delivery reliability during those critical high-volume periods.
What's fascinating here is how they link schema structure to customer satisfaction. It's a journey. They move from we used 2 tables to we created a predictive staffing model, and the final destination of that journey was improved customer satisfaction and verifiable operational efficiency. They didn't just clean data, they created actionable business intelligence that literally changed company policy. That is the ultimate hallmark of a distinction-level data technician.
Okay, let's shift focus now to the really critical area of data integrity. This covers K10, which is data quality standards, and K11, data quality processes. This is the hands-on messiness of real-world data, where your technical skill really meets governance.
Yeah, and data is never, ever perfectly clean, especially on a platform like Hungry now with thousands of transactions every single day. So the assessor needs proof that you can not only find complex quality issues, but, and this is the most important part, you can evaluate their specific business impact before you take corrective action.
So the assessor will likely frame it like this. Describe the most serious data quality issue you found and how you evaluated its impact.
Right, and the sources we looked at outlined a few pretty serious issues. But the strongest example always involves a precise quantification of the problem. For this, we're going to focus on the duplicate orders and the methodology used to isolate them.
As the candidates. The most serious issue was some unexpected data corruption, specifically duplicate orders being recorded following a system-wide service restart after a software update. This artificial inflation was polluting multiple downstream dashboards. I quantified the impact immediately. By comparing the original polluted aggregated revenue totals against the newly cleaned totals, I determined that the duplicates had caused a 3% inflation in our overall monthly revenue metrics.
And pause there. That number, 3%, is everything. It makes the problem real. It's not just messy data, it's a specific, measurable financial error.
As candidate, this meant senior management was believing the business was outperforming its targets when, in fact, it wasn't. Beyond that, we also tackled the issue of inconsistent categorical data like cuisine labels. You'd see things like Indian food, curry house, and authentic Indian for the same type of restaurant. I resolved the duplicate order issue using advanced SQL techniques, specifically leveraging the row number window function, partitioned by key identifiers like orderid, customer ID, and restaurant deity, and ordered by the creation timestamp.
Okay, that's a very technical detail, but it's a crucial one. Let's delve into that row number choice. Why was that specific SQL function better than just running a simple group by or distinct? An assessor might absolutely ask that.
It's a great question, because the choice demonstrates a sophisticated approach to governance. Using row number, partitioned by the ordered, but ordered by the creation timestamp, means you are explicitly deciding which record, in this case the newest one, to keep. A simple distinct or group by might just pick one arbitrarily, or you could lose other crucial non-duplicate information from the row. The candidate is showing they had complete control over the process, minimizing data loss while maximizing accuracy. That is the definition of data quality under K10.
The distinction here is that the candidate didn't just fix the problem. They quantified the impact, that 3% inflation, and they presented that finding. That quantitative evaluation justifies the time spent on cleaning to the business, and it helps secure stakeholder buy-in for future data governance projects.
A candidate. For the cuisine labels, I created lookup tables to standardize the naming conventions. This resolved major grouping issues that were actually blocking our marketing team from correctly identifying high-growth cuisine categories.
Another great example, a data quality issue directly blocking a different department's strategic goals.
Now, we have to consider the counterfactual. If those issues hadn't been fixed, what would the cost have been? This leads to the next assessor probe. What would the risk be if these data issues had not been addressed?
And a distinction response here has to be framed around three things: operational consequences, financial misstatement, and the erosion of trust, both internally and externally.
As candidate, the risks would have been catastrophic, really, across every department. Flawed KPIs would have generated severely misleading management reporting. I'm talking about crucial metrics like average delivery speeds, restaurant performance rankings, and even rider compensation metrics. Decisions based on that 3% inflated revenue figure, like setting unrealistic budget forecasts, misallocating marketing spend, or making incorrect staffing decisions, would have been fundamentally misinformed.
Good. He's covered the internal impact. Now for the external.
As candidate. But beyond just internal efficiency, this lack of data reliability damages trust with our partners. Imagine a restaurant appearing to significantly underperform in our ranking system solely because of missing timestamps or corrupted ID linkages. We risk alienating a valuable business partner based on, well, junk data. Preventing that protects our credibility and prevents potential contractual disputes that could arise from inaccurate performance reviews.
That is such a strong finish. That response successfully connects poor data quality not just to some internal calculation error, but to a relationship failure, a financial risk, and potential contractual jeopardy. It demonstrates K10 understanding the serious downstream impact of poor data quality on the entire organization.
Let's move to the systematic process of validation. This is the step that verifies the correctness of the data after you've cleaned it. So the assessor might ask, talk me through how you validated your data, and why is corrective action important?
For this one, the candidate has to clearly differentiate validation from cleaning and then list specific, measurable checks they performed.
As candidate, I employed a structured three-step validation framework. First, I used range checks to enforce business logic. For example, flagging any delivery that registered as taking under 5 minutes or over 3 hours, as these are physically impossible under normal circumstances. Second, referential integrity checks were absolutely vital. I verified that every order ID matched a valid active driver ID and restaurant ID in their respective master tables, which prevents orphan records. Third, I applied logic checks, such as ensuring that restaurants marked as temporarily closed had no new active orders recorded during that period.
Very clear, very structured. Now for the second part of the question.
As candidate, the reason corrective action is so crucial is this. Validation only flags the problems. It identifies what is wrong and where. Corrective action is the process of implementing the solution and, crucially, addressing the root cause. For example, when my validation process flagged a repeated pattern of missing delivery finish timestamps coming from one specific type of restaurant partner app, I didn't just clean the existing data with imputation. I escalated that recurring technical issue to the engineering team and helped them define the requirements for a permanent fix in the partner app. That proactive measure prevented dozens of future errors and demonstrated a commitment to proactive data governance, which is K11, rather than just reactive cleaning.
That proactive approach, escalating the recurring issue to engineering, is the key differentiator there. It shows the candidate thinks systemically. They're looking for permanent solutions, which shifts their role from just pipeline maintenance towards genuine data governance.
Now for the really nuanced probe. This one tests true reflective judgment. The assessor asks, how do you decide when to impute data and when to leave it blank or exclude the record entirely?
This is a tough one. It tests the candidate's understanding of statistical bias, the integrity of the data, and the risk tolerance that's dictated by what the metric is actually being used for.
As candidate, That decision is based entirely on assessing the risk of introducing bias, and it's directly aligned with the metric's purpose and the stakeholder's decision-making process. For highly sensitive financial KPIs, for instance, calculating total revenue or tracking order values, I would absolutely avoid any form of imputation. The risk of skewing financial reports or misstating revenue is simply too high, and it compromises the integrity of the numbers. In those cases, I would exclude the record, flag it, and probably raise it for manual investigation by the finance team.
Good. Clear rules, clear justification.
As candidate. However, for less critical operational metrics like, say, average delivery time across a vast pool of thousands of orders, median imputation can be acceptable. But only when the percentage of missing values is extremely small, say less than 0.5%, and the goal is just a high-level trend overview. The median is preferred over the mean because it's less sensitive to extreme outliers, which minimizes the bias in the overall trend calculation. My rule of thumb is this. If the imputation could lead to a change in strategic direction or a financial misstatement, you exclude. If it's just smoothing some statistical noise for operational trending, you may cautiously impute.
That is a highly evaluative and risk-aware answer. The learner is acknowledging that data handling requires judgment, that it's all based on context. They clearly demonstrated why exclusion is necessary for financial integrity, and they demonstrated the specific statistical knowledge median versus mean to defend their imputation choice for operational metrics. This fulfills the K11 criteria by showing a clear, risk-based approach to data manipulation.
All right, so we've selected the data, we've cleaned it, we've validated its integrity. Now we move to the stage where all that technical effort translates into business success, delivering the insight. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the most perfectly clean data in the world is, well, it's useless if you can't communicate its findings effectively to actually drive business action.
That's so true. This section covers K5, which is all about stakeholder needs, K12 on communication strategy, S10 on having a structured approach, and S13, visual communication. The data technician has to transition seamlessly here from being a technical expert to being a business interpreter.
And the key to distinction here is what?
It's clarity, it's narrative, and crucially, it's adapting the complexity of your message based on the audience.
Okay, so the assessor asks us question 4. How did you ensure your dashboard or report met stakeholder requirements?
This question is a direct test of skill S10. It demands a structured, methodical process, not just an ad hoc, I built what they asked for kind of answer.
As a candidate, my process was fundamentally proactive and collaborative, ensuring we had alignment from the very first step. Instead of just building something first, I initiated a series of scoping meetings with the primary stakeholders: the operations manager, the finance analyst, and the lead writer supervisor. I used active listening techniques to understand 4 specific criteria. 1, what specific business questions they needed answered today. 2, what metrics mattered most to their daily tasks. That's K5. 3, how the dashboard would actually be used. For example, is this for a 5-minute daily stand-up or a deep dive monthly strategy review? And 4, who the secondary audience would be.
I love that. He's thinking of the user context from the very beginning.
As candidate, before writing a single line of visualization code, I utilized mock sketches or wireframes, sometimes just on a whiteboard, sometimes in PowerPoint. I presented these low-fidelity drafts to confirm expectations, to clarify KPI definitions like how we all agree to define an on-time delivery, and to confirm the logical flow of the information. This iterative process, using mock-ups, confirmed expectations early, prevented a ton of rework later, and guaranteed that the final visuals reflected real, current business needs, not just my technical interpretation of them.
That entire response just screams skill S10 applying structured problem solving and planning. The use of mock sketches and that emphasis on repeating requirements back to stakeholders shows a highly professional, risk-minimizing approach to project management. It avoids that common, fatal mistake of delivering a beautiful dashboard that answers the completely wrong question.
Now, the assessment has to push on the adaptability component, which is K12. As assessor, how did you adapt your communication style depending on who you're speaking to?
Yeah, this is a test of emotional intelligence and professional versatility. The candidate has to show they can adjust the level of technical detail, the focus of the conversation, and the language they use.
As candidate, I consciously segmented my communication approach because I understood that clarity for one group is just jargon for another. For my technical colleagues, like the developers and the engineering team, I provided very granular detail. We would discuss the underlying mechanics, the specific SQL joins I used, the table relationships, data modeling choices like star schema implementations, and even the performance latency of the queries
Okay, so that's the tech-to-tech conversation.
as candidate. But for managers and senior stakeholders like our chief operating officer, I shifted the focus entirely. I would bypass the technical process completely and focus solely on the critical KPIs, the resulting trends, the explicit business impact, and my recommended action. For example, our rider utilization rate dropped 12% at 7 p.m. I recommend we pre-schedule buffer time. Then, crucially, when communicating with riders or restaurant partners, I used extremely simple, non-technical language and highly concrete, localized examples. Instead of talking about referential integrity failure, I would say, hey, we noticed the system lost track of 5 of your orders last Tuesday, which artificially slowed down your score. This adaptability ensured that every audience received actionable information tailored to their specific needs and their level of understanding.
That segmentation, technical, managerial, operational, is a key differentiator for K-12. It shows the candidate understands that the developer needs to know how the data was joined to ensure the system is robust, but the manager only needs to know what they need to do next to improve performance. The focus shifts from data manipulation to decision enablement.
And part of that communication is storytelling, right? That was Q13 in the outline. It's about building a narrative around the numbers, taking the stakeholder on a journey.
Oh, absolutely. A distinction level analyst doesn't just present a pie chart and walk away. They provide context and they provide causality. You move from raw charts to connecting insights to real business impact. So, for example, instead of just showing a spike in delays on a chart, the narrative becomes: the data shows a statistically significant drop in delivery speed that directly correlates with the 7 p.m. rider shift change. The underlying reason is a predictable rider shortage caused by the system struggling to transition shifts during peak demand.
That narrative explains the why.
Exactly. It explains the why, and it makes the recommendation for a system change undeniable. It tells a story.
Let's talk about the actual output, the dashboard design itself.
Yeah.
As assessor, how did you decide which visualization to use? This is Q11.
The candidate has to justify their visualization choice based on the intended message, which draws on their K-12 and S13 knowledge. It can't just be about aesthetic preference.
As candidate, my selection criteria prioritize 3 things: readability, message clarity, and minimizing the cognitive load on the end user. I approached each metric with a "what is the best visual tool for this specific job?" mindset. For showing delivery delays and rider availability over a span of time, a line chart was the most effective visualization because the continuous line clearly illustrates trends, seasonality, and inflection points way better than discrete bars. But for showing comparative data, like cuisine popularity rankings or rider efficiency across different zones, a bar chart was the obvious choice to facilitate quick, comparative reading. I always ensured that the visualization choice allowed the core insight to be grasped within seconds, confirming that the visual output matched the analytic message.
And that ties directly into modern governance requirements around usability and accessibility, which is Q14. The assessor will absolutely want to know that you are designing for all stakeholders.
As assessor, what accessibility considerations did you apply to your dashboards and reports?
As candidate, accessibility is mandatory for professional reporting. It's not an optional extra. I ensured several standards were met. Firstly, I utilized high contrast color palettes, and I avoided relying solely on color to convey meaning. Specifically, I designed for users with common visual impairments like red-green color blindness. Secondly, I maintained a strict, consistent layout and labeling structure so that users with cognitive load issues or who relied on assistive technology knew exactly where to find key information. Thirdly, I made sure all axes and data points were clearly labeled, avoiding technical jargon, that's S13. For internal reports, where it was feasible, I also included screen reader-friendly alternative text for key visuals, ensuring the central insights like delivery speed decreased 15% in Zone C were verbally available to all colleagues regardless of their technology or ability.
That attention to detail, linking visualization choice to broad usability and accessibility, really demonstrates K5 understanding stakeholder needs in their entirety, not just what the manager wants to see. Okay, last one for this section. The learning curve. As assessor, tell me about a time you experienced a miscommunication or had to handle constructive criticism regarding your report and how you resolved it. This is Q15.
This is a test of self-awareness and professional maturity, which is behavior B6. A perfect candidate isn't someone who never makes mistakes, but one who learns from them and adapts.
As candidate, an early draft of my delivery performance dashboard included far too many metrics. I think I had about 15 different charts and KPIs because, honestly, I wanted to demonstrate the sheer volume of clean data I had collected. The feedback from the operations manager was blunt. He said, "It's overwhelming and unusable for a daily check-in." The miscommunication stemmed from my assumption that more data equaled more value, and I completely failed to consider the user context.
Great self-awareness there.
As candidate, I resolved it immediately by actively soliciting detailed feedback and then simplifying the design down to the 3 core KPIs they actually needed for their daily stand-ups: the on-time rate, rider utilization, and the current zone delay average. I removed all the clutter, and I added explicit annotations directly onto the charts to highlight the most important trends. That experience really reinforced the importance of ruthless prioritization, and it taught me that, in a business setting, clarity always trumps completeness.
That's a highly reflective answer. It shows humility, the ability to take constructive criticism on board, and the skill to course correct under pressure. Those are all hallmarks of distinction-level professional behavior, hitting S10 and B6.
Okay, let's move now to the indispensable area, data governance. These are the guardrails that protect the organization, its customers, and its legal standing. This section is going to cover K13 on legislation, S12 on security, and B6, which is all about professionalism and ethical behavior.
Right. And for this, the assessor needs absolute, unwavering confidence that you treat data as a valuable, sensitive, and regulated asset. For a distinction, just being aware of the rules is not nearly enough. You have to demonstrate the practical implementation of security measures in your daily work.
So the assessor asks a direct question. What legal frameworks and internal policies guided your handling of personal data? That's Q16.
A distinction answer here has to be comprehensive. You have to name specific external regulations and then show how they translated into internal practical security controls you actually used.
As candidate, my handling of personal data, which includes customer names, addresses, and phone numbers, as well as highly sensitive rider location data, was strictly guided by multiple layers of policy. Explicitly, I adhered to the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, for all our EU and UK operations, and also our internal data handling policy, which covers all data types globally. Operationally, this meant I enforced the core GDPR principles. For instance, I applied the principle of data minimization, that's K13, by removing all personally identifiable information, or PII, like names and street addresses before the analysis phase, replacing them with pseudonymized IDs through tokenization.
Okay, he's not just naming the law, he's explaining how he applied its principles. That's key.
As candidate, I also adhered strictly to role-based access controls, RBAC, ensuring I only access the minimum required data set necessary for my task. That's the principle of least privilege from S12. Furthermore, I rigorously followed internal retention schedules, and all files were stored exclusively on secure, encrypted, company-approved cloud locations. Nothing ever went on local hard drives or insecure shared folders.
That response demonstrates comprehensive awareness. I mean, talking about GDPR is required, but referencing the specific internal data handling policy and then linking that to practical steps like pseudonymization and RBAC implementation, that shows the candidate has actually embedded these security requirements into their daily workflow. That's S12 in action.
Let's focus a bit more on that security implementation. An assessor might probe deeper. How did you implement role-based access controls in your project environment, and why was this crucial?
As candidate, implementing RBAC meant that the analytical database I used for reporting was entirely separate from the live transactional production environment. My user account was specifically configured to only access the pseudonymized delivery and performance metrics table, which contained no direct PII. Crucially, the finance team's analyst accounts were restricted from seeing the rider performance data, and the operations team was restricted from seeing financial commission data. This separation was vital to prevent unauthorized data linkage and potential misuse. If, for instance, a team member's credentials were compromised, the potential breach would be significantly contained because of that least privilege principle being enforced across all data access points.
Now, for the gravity of the consequences, the assessor will absolutely probe on this. As assessor, what would the impact be if this personal data was mishandled or improperly stored? This is a follow-up to Q5, also it's Q19.
The response here needs to hit the legal, the financial, and especially the human consequences angle to show the candidate grasps the full weight of their responsibility.
As candidate, the consequences would be catastrophic and multifaceted. Legally, we would face severe GDPR breaches leading to massive financial penalties that could reach millions and, frankly, cripple the business. Financially, The subsequent investigation costs, remediation efforts, and operational disruption would be immense. But perhaps most significantly, it would cause irreparable reputational damage and a profound loss of trust with both our customers and our crucial restaurant and rider partners.
He's layering the impact. It's not just one thing.
As candidate. For instance, leaking sensitive rider location data, which we collect hourly, poses direct personal safety risk to our drivers. And if customers lost confidence in our ability to protect their addresses and payment details, they would immediately shift to a competitor. So, secure, ethical handling is essential not only for legal compliance, but for maintaining business continuity, market viability, and most importantly, human safety.
That answer is highly sophisticated. It moves beyond just, we'd get a fine, and discusses the critical human and market consequences. Linking the abstract legal framework of GDPR to the specific practical risk of personal safety, the rider location data, is a crucial differentiator for a distinction candidate.
Okay, so beyond security, we need to address professional standards and ethical responsibilities. This is Q17. As assessor, what professional standards or ethical considerations did you need to balance in your work?
This moves beyond simple compliance into the candidate's moral judgment regarding data use and the potential impact of their algorithms.
As candidate, the primary ethical considerations centered on ensuring fair representation within our analysis and reporting. At Hungry Now, we needed to ensure that our insights didn't inadvertently or unfairly prioritize larger high-revenue chain restaurants at the expense of smaller, independent businesses when we were analyzing performance or making operational recommendations. For instance, larger chains might have dedicated dispatch staff, making their average delivery times artificially better than a small family-run operation. If we only reported on the absolute average, we risk marginalizing those smaller partners through biased operational recommendations.
That is a very subtle but incredibly important point about algorithmic fairness.
As candidate, my professional standard was to ensure I evaluated and documented the fairness of the metrics. For example, by creating a segmented report that compared restaurants only within their own size category. This also required strict adherence to commercial confidentiality, which is Q20. Restaurant pricing agreements, commission structures, and specific sales data absolutely cannot be shared across different internal teams or with other partners, which required an extra layer of access control and data redaction in my reports.
And that demonstrates a real awareness of potential structural bias that can be embedded in operational data. The risk reduction strategy he mentioned, minimizing data exposure, validating accuracy, documenting assumptions, is the practical application of this professional and ethical mindset, which is all B6. They understand that the role of a data technician carries responsibility far beyond just technical execution. Okay, our penultimate section turns inward, focusing on the leaner's growth mindset. This is where we test KSBs related to continuous improvement, that's K16, S14, and S15, and effective collaboration, which is S17. Data is a constantly evolving field, so demonstrating a structured, continuous approach to learning is absolutely vital.
It really is. The assessor wants assurance that you are not a static resource. They want to know you're an adaptable asset who understands the concept of a skills gap analysis and has a structured path for career development.
The assessor will often ask something like this: how do you structure your learning and professional development within the context of your daily role? That's Q21.
And the distinction strategy here must be structured, planned, and reflective. It has to demonstrate K16 mastery.
As candidate, I approach my professional development with a structured plan, not relying on ad hoc learning. At the start of each quarter, I conduct a brief skills gap analysis based on Hungry Now's known technology roadmap. For instance, if we're planning to migrate from SQL to a cloud-based Python ETL pipeline, that creates an immediate skills gap for me. I then set monthly objectives to close that gap. I utilize established, formal online courses, specifically LinkedIn Learning and Microsoft Learn, for specific tool certifications like Azure Data Fundamentals. And I participate actively in our internal mentoring programs and knowledge-sharing sessions.
He's not just learning for the sake of it, it's targeted.
As candidate. And this isn't passive consumption. I commit to practicing new tools on our sandbox datasets for 2 hours a week before I even think about applying them in production environments, which is S14. I use regular reflection and self-assessment rubrics to gauge my progress against my stated objectives, ensuring my learning path always aligns with the organization's goals.
That structured approach skills gap analysis leading to a development plan and then practical application is the ideal K16 behavior. It's not just I read articles. It's I learn what the business needs and then I execute a plan to acquire that specific valuable skill.
And crucially, that learning has to be linked back to a measurable business outcome. That's S15. As assessor, Can you provide a specific example of how your learning positively impacted the business? This links back to Q6 and Q22.
Yep, the answer must provide a specific tool that was learned and a specific quantifiable result that was linked to that application.
As candidate, when we transitioned to using Power BI more heavily for our senior management reporting, I identified a specific gap in my expertise around complex calculation logic. So I immediately created a self-development plan focused on mastering DAX, data analysis expressions. Once I improved my DAX skills, I was able to redesign the main delivery time dashboard. Previously, we were only reporting static daily average delivery times, which were highly volatile and noisy.
I can see where this is going.
As candidate, by implementing DAX, I was able to calculate 7-day and 30-day rolling averages for delivery speeds and rider utilization rates. And this transition from static to rolling averages was critical. It filtered out all the daily noise and the seasonal spikes, which allowed managers to detect persistent underlying trends much earlier. This led to more stable and actionable operational decisions regarding driver scheduling and zone resource allocation.
That is precision. Learning a specific tool, DAX, led directly to a superior analytical output, the rolling averages, which then yielded a better business outcome, more stable operational planning. That connection demonstrates both skill S15, taking ownership of performance, and K16 mastery. He also assessed his own performance, which is Q23, by tracking the stakeholder feedback on the new dashboard's utility.
Okay, finally, collaboration. Data technicians rarely work in a vacuum. They have to integrate across different teams. As assessor, tell me about a time you worked as part of a multifunctional team to achieve a specific business outcome. This is Q24.
The response needs to clearly identify the participating teams, the common goal, and the specific contribution that was made by the data role to hit S17.
As a candidate, I supported a major, high-priority cross-functional project involving the operations department, the restaurant onboarding team, and the engineering department. The goal was to optimize the driver assignment algorithm to improve efficiency and reduce waiting times during the critical 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. peak hours. My role was foundational. I was responsible for sourcing, cleaning, and validating the comprehensive historical delivery, latency, and performance data sets that the engineers needed to train and test their new machine learning algorithm.
So he was the data provider for the project.
As candidate, to ensure smooth collaboration and prevent silos, I used clear, structured technical documentation when handing over data sets to the developers, clarifying data lineage and schema definitions. Crucially, I frequently validated my modeling assumptions. For instance, how we collectively define idle time with the operations team before proceeding with the final data preparation. And I managed my time and competing priorities using a shared Kanban board that helped balance the immediate needs of operations with the long-term accuracy requirements of engineering.
The distinction marker there is the ability to navigate these differing professional languages and priorities. That's S17. The candidate didn't just provide the data, they acted as a translator between the technical language of engineering and the operational language of the business.
Let's test that collaboration further. A good probe here would address professional behavior, B6.
Yeah.
As assessor, what was the biggest challenge working across these different roles, and how did you resolve it? This is Q25.
This tests conflict resolution and the ability to manage competing demands in a realistic way.
As candidate, the main challenge was, inevitably, managing the divergent priorities and expectations. Operations wanted immediate, tactical results to solve their current pain points, like, why is Zone C always so slow? Engineering, on the other hand, prioritized absolute accuracy, system robustness, and clean code for the new algorithm. And management generally just wanted maximum simplicity and high-level KPIs for resource allocation.
The classic triangle of priorities.
As candidate, I recognized that my function was to act as a crucial bridge between these groups. This involved translating complex technical issues like database latency or API error codes into plain business-relevant language for the operations manager, making the technical problem actionable for them. Conversely, I ensured that engineering's expectations for data quality were realistic given the operational constraints and the legacy systems we had to deal with. My role was really to maintain momentum, balancing these competing needs and ensuring the project moved forward collaboratively while respecting the core priorities of each department. And that ultimately led to the successful deployment of the optimized algorithm.
Acting as a bridge is the perfect description of a highly effective, distinction-level data technician. They facilitate communication, they mediate conflicting demands, and they ensure all viewpoints are valued. That demonstrates strong professional behavior, B6, under pressure.
So what does this all mean? We have successfully navigated a really detailed, high-pressure mock portfolio simulation. It spanned all the critical KSB areas, and we used the Hungry Now project as our canvas. This mock run provided a detailed template for success, but let's synthesize the core takeaways and the structured feedback now for the learner.
Yeah, this structured feedback, drawn directly from what we know assessors expect and mapped back to the KSBs, is the most valuable preparation tool you have. We need to categorize what the candidate did well, the distinction markers, and also where candidates often fall short and lose marks when they're under pressure.
Okay, let's start with the highlights. What were the clear distinction markers in this simulated performance?
First and foremost, strong, highly structured answers that were rooted in specific, verifiable evidence. Every single response was tied back to the Hungry Now project, detailing what was done using specific advanced tools. We heard SQL row number, mapping tables, Power BI, DAX. This moves the discussion out of the abstract into measurable, professional action.
Second, and I think this is probably the highest weighted distinction marker, was explicitly linking every technical decision to a quantifiable business impact. We saw this everywhere, from fixing the data quality issues, that 3% revenue inflation correction, to driving operational changes, like the creation of the dynamic staffing model based on weather data, which resulted in a 4-point CSAT improvement. That linkage proves the fundamental value of the role.
Third, excellent awareness of data quality, validation, and proactive governance. That's K11. The candidate didn't just clean the data, they evaluated the risk of imputation, and they demonstrated they knew how to escalate recurring system issues to engineering to prevent them from happening again. They shifted their role from being a reactive technician to a proactive system governor.
And fourth, and this is equally important, was the demonstration of communication agility, K12. The ability to segment and adapt their language for technical peers, for managers, and for operational users, using that bridge metaphor, shows a high level of professional maturity and effectiveness in cross-functional teams, which is S17.
Okay, so those are the do's.
Now for the don'ts. The areas to strengthen the common pitfalls where candidates often lose their distinction status under pressure, usually due to a lack of deep reflection.
The biggest pitfall is sticking to description when you need to move to evaluation. Candidates have to focus on evaluating why their choices were made, and the best way to do that is often by contrasting them with viable alternatives. For instance, why was row number chosen over distinct? Why was median imputation chosen over mean imputation or just exclusion? The answer has to discuss the context, the risk, and the inherent bias in the choice you made.
Also, I've seen candidates who tend to keep their lessons learned internal. You need to include more explicit reflection on risks, alternatives, and lessons learned in every answer. If you mention a challenge, you must discuss what the organization learned from it and what you, personally, would do differently next time. That's the reflection component of S15 that assessors are looking for.
And finally, a very specific compliance point. When you're discussing the legal and ethical matters in Section 4, generic statements like, "we were careful with data," are not enough. Assessors need to hear the specific legal framework you adhere to. You must explicitly mention GDPR, the principle of least privilege from S12, and your own organizational data handling policies. This proves that you operate within the required guardrails, and you're not just vaguely aware of them.
This brings us to the action points for practice. How should the learner prepare for the real thing, incorporating all these insights?
First, you must prepare 2 to 3 strong, multifaceted examples for each KSB area. These examples have to be specific, detailed stories like the weather data connection or the DAX rolling average calculation ready to tell. Second, you absolutely must practice answering using the STAR method. That's situation, task, action, result. That structure naturally forces you to include the business impact we've been talking about in that results section.
And finally, I'd say rehearse at least one example where something went wrong, a failure, a mistake, or a conflict, and how you professionally corrected it and ensured the system or the team learned from the error. Assessors value this display of resilience and self-awareness more than they value a story of perfect execution. Reviewing your internal data policies and the practical application of GDPR principles like data retention and minimization is a non-negotiable step before the assessment.
The self-assessment checklist we reviewed in the sources is the final test. Before your EPA, you should ask yourself for every single KSB, can I explain this technical concept confidently and clearly? Do I have a specific, detailed example tied to a business result? And do I fully understand the risk and the organizational impact of my actions? If you can honestly answer yes to all 3, you are ready for distinction. #tagoutro.
We've covered immense ground today. We provided a comprehensive, structured template for distinction-level preparation, using the exact language and pressure points of the endpoint assessment.
The fundamental lesson of this deep dive is really understanding the crucial shift that the assessor is testing for. You are moving past the designation of a data technician, someone who just cleans data reactively, to becoming a data governor. That's someone who prevents errors from occurring and proactively drives strategic business value.
That proactive step is the difference between achieving a pass and achieving a distinction.
The final provocative thought for you, the learner, to carry forward is this. We saw how escalating recurring issues led to a permanent fix in the Hungry Now Partner App's timestamping. How might you, as a data professional, formalize your proposals for permanent preventative system fixes? Not just writing cleaning scripts, but actually proposing system changes in your own organization to fully embed proactive data governance. Focusing on that systemic preventative impact is how you reach the next level of influence.
Excellent point. Take these structured, reflective answers, apply them to your own portfolio narrative, and practice the delivery. Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.